Hello everyone, I'm Vijender and welcome to Practical System Design. Today I'm going to show you how you can easily identify if an application which has been given to you is based on a monolith or a microservice based architecture, right? Now a lot of times people think that just because you have a lot of services or an endpoints, as you can see here, and just because you have a lot of databases that they talk to, it's a microservice based architecture. For example, I made this mistake for a significant part of my career until I reached a point where I was actually deploying the services, and then it struck me, hey, hold on, a significant part of what I understood was wrong, right? And that's exactly why we are having these sessions and why these kind of sessions from practical system design differ from all the other videos and content you receive online, because we give the real scoop in terms of what happens under the hood under each of these services, right? Now let's say you have these services, user service, order service, and an inventory service, correct? And you can see that there is one get method and two post methods for the user service. There is one get, one post, one put for the order service, and inventory has get, post, and put, right? Now the database that the user service talks to is MySQL, order service talks to MongoDB, and inventory talks to DynamoDB, right? Now take a pause here and try to think, is it a microservice based architecture or a monolithic application, right? You can pause the video here, think about it, and then continue. Okay, fine. Now, I'll tell you that the answer to that question is that it could be either of them, right? Now, I'm sure you must be confused as to what's happening. How can it be possible? It looks like a clear case microservice-based architecture, right? The key question that you must ask in such cases is, what is the deployment strategy for these services, right? Are they, if I were to make a change to the user service, for example, the get endpoint, in terms of how I fetch the user logic and deploy the change, will it impact the order service and will it impact the inventory service? Yes or no? If it will impact, which is yes, that means it's a monolith. If it does not impact, which is no, that means it is a microservice based architecture. So the deployment or the dependence of one service on the other is the key to defining whether it's a microservice or a monolithic based architecture, right? Now, it's also true that people say the database is tightly coupled, but it's not the key indicator, right? We'll explore. Let's look at this a little bit more. Let's say you have a user device which is sending a request to an API gateway, and you have this entire application which has all these endpoints, correct? And there, this entire application talks to MongoDB and MySQL, correct? It's not that each service talks in that individual level. So if I make a change to the user service, the entire application is restarted, and that will impact the other services as well, which will impact any requests which are coming from the user device for those services, correct? Now, if I look at a microservice-based architecture, the endpoints are all different, right? So you have the services which are separate, they deploy separately, and they connect to the database also separately, correct? Now, if I were to make a change to the user service, it has no impact on the order service and the inventory service, correct? Now, coming to the next point, should the database for each microservice be separate, or can I have two microservices talking to the same database, right? That's a classic case of trade-offs in system design, right? Now, I want you to put it in the comments below in terms of what you think is the trade-off involved if I were to have two microservices talk to the same database vis-a-vis having them talk to separate databases each, right? We'll talk about it in a separate video. Now, I would like to also show you some under the hood kind of stuff, right? If I were to look at the monolith, right, you have, this is code written in Node, right? It's a Node service. You'll notice that I'm connecting to three different databases, correct? And you have three different endpoints corresponding to these three different services: user service, order service, and inventory, correct? Now the bottom line is that service, they're all listening to a single port. So every request that comes goes through that port, routes through the respective service, and returns a response back, right? Now if I were to look at it from a little bit detailed perspective of monolith architecture, you're seeing that the same code, now you have different routes, single service, a single port 3000, and you have, let's say, an orders method called create order. So if I make a change to this and deploy it, all the services get impacted, all these three services. Now, if you look at a microservice based architecture, you'll notice that the port is different in each case. You'll see that the user service here is running on port 3001, while the order service here is running on port 3002, correct? So if one service is, if you have a change to the create order function here, it will not in any way impact, it will only restart service running on port 3002 and not on the service which is running on 3001, right? And if I were to look at a little bit more in terms of the server.js as well, in terms of configuration, you'll notice that in case of a monolith, you'll have only one server.js which has all the models, routes, controllers, everything coupled into that, correct? Whereas in a microservice based architecture, you'll notice that each one of them has its own package.json file, right, which defines how the service is defined and deployed. Okay, I hope this gives a better picture to you in terms of how you would be identifying a monolith versus a microservice based application going forward. And please do put in your comments with respect to the question I've asked, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.